You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Super excited about today's guests. Ivan, why don't you go ahead and introduce the guys we've got with us today?
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce you guys to Ethan Ott and Jay Price. So these guys are coming from Consolidation world. We're going to talk about innovation in consolidation management and how to provide the experience that the veterinarians and the veterinary staff want without high touch. So welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for spending the time. Can you tell us a little bit about SVP and where you guys at?
Yeah, sure. I founded SVP in October 2014, so I had my 3 original base hospitals at that point in time. I was a full-time practicing veterinarian, and then took on a private equity partner in October 2014. With again, and the nexus of SVP was found with those 3 hospitals, and converted the name to Southern Veterinary Partners. Today, so a little over 5 years later, 5.5 years later, we have 127 hospitals across 15 states.
Wow!
And almost 3,000 employees. We're headquartered here in Birmingham, Alabama. Most of our consolidation, obviously, is in the southern geography. And Ethan's been with us for 3 years now. Yep. He's pretty amazing that 3 years later, he's one of the more longer in the tooth employees at SVP. He's been a tremendous asset and contributor to our growth and execution strategy on what we're doing.
Awesome. Jay, a quick question for you. What the hell is that ride like, to go from a guy that has a couple of veterinary hospitals to the guy that's leading the charge with a company as large as SVP?
Yeah, I'm a lot grayer today than I was, 5 years ago. So,
you still have hair.
Your COVID beard's coming in pretty good too.
I do. It's just it's pretty white. And apologize for the mullet I have right now, because it's been obviously we're in a shelter in place and haven't had a haircut in 2 months.
Oh, we love mullets on this podcast. It's great.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's really appropriate for the CEO of Southern Veterinary Partners to have a mullet anyway. So anyway, no, I think it's been tremendous. I mean, I was always an entrepreneurial veterinarian and had 3 hospitals. I think the biggest thing for me kind of coming into this is that, it's one thing to operate 3 hospitals that are within an hour or so of each other, right? Relatively high touch. You can visit them frequently. You're in the trenches on a day-to-day basis inside 1 or 2 of those hospitals. You know everybody, all the players inside the hospitals exceptionally well. Scaling that across, state lines and geographies, and just the back office infrastructure and scale that you have to put into place in order to be able to execute and deliver upon what you tell people coming into an acquisition is just vastly different. It's been tremendous. I mean, it's been a great ride. I mean, just being a veterinarian, I didn't have an MBA or anything like that, and so I've gotten a crash course in scalability and really from an infrastructure perspective, what is needed from a high growth business like ours. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. And I met Ethan at Veterinary Innovation Summit a couple of years ago, and you were just about a year into the organization. So what was the thesis that you were hired for? And I know that you guys are highly involved in data, which I'm happy to dive into, but what was sort of, when you came in, what was the task?
Yeah, I think day one, one of our medical directors leaned over to me and said, so you're the data guy, right? And so I think really it was a blank canvas, but it was in some form of, let's have more structured data and analytics. It's grown significantly since then as SVP has grown and as our teams have grown, our capabilities have grown. When we met, that was, like you said, about a year in, and that first year, including Veterinary Innovation Summit, which I think is a really phenomenal conference, was really just soaking up everything I could about the industry so that we could take some learnings from some of the other industries we've had experience in, and merge that with all of the really phenomenal knowledge that exists in this space.
That's awesome. So when you're focusing on the data, I know that a lot of focus in the veterinary practices, and the problem is that everybody has a different system. And if you're not standardizing them, then you have the whole disparate data points that are not connecting with each other. And as far as I know, and I work with some consolidators, I find that the best they come to is really to get at least the revenue from their PIMs, but it's then hard to connect the expense, and then we're very far from operations. So are there any operational data that you're acquiring as well, or expense mixed in with the revenue from the practices, or that's sort of still ongoing challenge?
Yeah, so I think just in general, this has been a really interesting few years in this industry, but it's also been a really interesting and exciting period in technology and analytics. And we came along at a really fortuitous time in that we were able to see things like structured data, machine learning to help with code mapping, the ability to bring together different APIs from very disparate systems, and allowed us to build a place that could be very high touch with our clinics, with very rapid and detailed analytics without forcing all of our clinics to use one system or one set of codes, whether it be, the price management system or all kinds of different things that they would use in clinic. And so with that, I think our team has mapped just under 1 million unique codes across our hospitals. And so instead of all of our hospitals having to, from day one, learn a totally new language, they're able to continue to operate with their existing procedures, and we're able to translate that into something that is more uniform here centrally so we can help them out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing there is that, to be very frank, all the PIM systems in veterinary medicine are bad. I mean, there's just not been an enterprise-wide solution that's been built that's been able to really track along and keep up with consolidation in the industry. And frankly, I don't know that there ever needs to be one. I mean, I would love for there to be one, but the reality is that they're still designed for the single-use practitioner, which is the majority of what's out there. And so, I mean, everybody throws around that, there's 23,000 hospitals across the U.S. that can be consolidated. Well, the reality is the majority of those are hospitals that, over half of those are hospitals that you wouldn't want to consolidate. They're single doctor hospitals. They're in smaller markets, rural markets, things of that nature. And so when you kind of take a step back and look at it, is anybody really going to be incentivized to build a robust enterprise-wide solution for a consolidator? VCA has their own system. Banfield has their own system. So then really you're looking at the NVAs, the vet cores, of the world, and they just don't have enough hospitals at this point in time to justify the cost of that unless they want to build it themselves. We've thought about building our own, but that's not something we want to invest in right now. That's just not our bread and butter. And so one of the most disruptive things you can do inside a hospital is change the PIM system, especially post-acquisition. You only have a little bit of change capital coming into an acquisition. And so to change that right away, you're going to disrupt flow, you're going to disrupt efficiency, and frankly, you're going to disrupt revenue for a period of time because the conversions are all bad. They're all clunky. You lose data integrity, you lose reminders, you lose things. And so it just doesn't make a ton of sense. And so building something that, like that we have from a back office perspective allows that not to happen.
That's amazing. So one of the things that I thought of when we talked about the data and analytics, and it's an interesting example, I think it was Andrew Carnegie in one of his steel plants in the 30s, went in and he had this one steel plant that was just horribly inefficient compared to all of the others. And he went in and with chalk on the floor, wrote a number. And that number was the target for the crew that was coming in based upon what the crew from the previous night had done. So took a broad section of data from across his organization and then used it to motivate his low performing mills or low performing steel producers. And just by doing that, like one simple thing, the next shift bet that number, and then the next shift bet that number. So are you guys leveraging that data to increase efficiencies, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've really enjoyed doing in this space is, in that analogy, he didn't say, you guys did this revenue last night. And so I think when we first really started building out these capabilities and we looked around, there was a lot of talk about, total revenue of a practice, average visit, and some of those things are important. Don't get me wrong, but what's more important to us and to our clients and to our pets is compliance numbers, is making sure that your pets are getting heartworm prevention, making sure that they're getting lab testing. And so we have the ability to show a hospital not only what they're doing, but what their peers are doing. But we go much deeper, and I think to a more meaningful layer than, hey, here's what your average transaction was. Instead, we can say, hey, you're doing a phenomenal job of educating your clients and getting them to get heartworm prevention, but it looks like they're really lacking in early detection lab work. And so that's been a really meaningful value add, I think, to our clinics.
I mean, I think the biggest thing there, honestly, is that you have, back to Ethan's point, I mean, everybody in our industry has talked about two things, right? Is visit volume and ACT for years. And like, those aren't really actionable things. I mean, your ACT and certain demographics can only get so high before you start cutting visit volume. And so, I mean, really, it's more of giving our clinicians data that they can actually action on and have it be clean, reliable data. As veterinarians, we in general think that we're a whole heck of a lot better than we actually are at compliance. We just assume that we're better at compliance than we actually are. Then when you really start peeling back the layers, you quickly realize that you're not. You know, back to the unique thing that we have, very frankly, I mean, relative to all, I mean, similar to all the other consolidators, with the exception of Banfields of the world, none of our boxes are the same, right? So, I mean, Banfield, all their boxes are the same. Ours, none of them are the same. And so how that clinic was built and how that clinic was operating, you know, they may have a little bit different efficiency model, right? One clinic may leverage their techs 10 times better than the others, and they have fewer veterinarians and higher qualified technicians. Second clinic could have, you know, the opposite. They don't leverage their technicians that well, but they're still highly efficient and profitable. And so you have to understand the nuances and intricacies of everything you're acquiring, understand that they're not all created equal from a box perspective. And so you can't just say, hey, here's the doctor to tech ratio and exam rooms, because if you try to standardize everything and put it in one box, you're going to quickly miss out. So, you know, the data that we've built and the data that we look at on a consistent basis really gets into the nuance on each one of these locations. It gives them actionable tools that they can leverage to drive compliance and, frankly, efficiency and revenues inside their hospitals.
As Jay pointed out earlier, you know, I think a lot of clinics have had trouble with just their practice management system, really getting the insights they want out of that, which 5 years ago, that was really the only channel that the clinic had to look at for the client. But today, especially in this current COVID climate, we see the clinical piece, we see the online pharmacy, we see telemedicine, we see some wellness plans, and it gets really tangled really fast, especially, you know, things like compliance. Do you just look at the clinical piece? Even that alone is going to be difficult for an independent clinic. But then layering in the client and patient's clinical compliance plus their online pharmacy compliance, that gets really complex really fast. And it would be expensive to dig into on a single hospital scale. And so we think that as the industry becomes more and more omni-channel, we can continue to add even more value to help cut through some of the noise.
That's awesome. So, you know, this is super interesting. So you guys are doing system and data integration, and then you're driving the analytics. And basically what I heard, that you're looking sort of at almost a full balance scorecard. You're not just looking at the revenue, but you're looking at experience, you're looking at the client experience and employee experience and your growth opportunities, which is amazing and not done by many people in the industry. And what's interesting, when in my SmartFlow years, I've done quite a few practices in Europe. And it's interesting that in the UK right now, there's about 60% of industry consolidated compared to us in North America. And what is important, what I talk to, you know, executive leaders there, is that right now they're seeing that just buying the practices and winning the arbitrage is not enough. You actually need to focus on operational efficiency. And eventually, this is, I think, Jay, going back to the type of practices we can buy. We're running out of those practices, and now someone needs not only to improve the operational efficiency, but also measure. And that is what you guys are doing, which is amazing. My question is, you mentioned the pharmacy and wellness mixed into the data. I mean, those are the most common topics. They just escape your revenue and you can't combine that. And this is one of the most complex data solutions that you have to do, because all of that stuff is not coming into PIMS. So you guys actually tackled that one as well?
Yeah, so we've more broadly rolled out online pharmacies than wellness. So wellness is really, for us so far, it's at the hospital's discretion. Most of them that have it, they've brought it in. So we bring that in to an extent to date. The main integration really is with our online pharmacy. And, what we've seen in the last couple of months in this industry and in just about every industry is a pretty significant uptick in the use of online channels. And so with that, we're able to layer in at a client-specific level, much deeper than just the clinic or the category, what the whole picture looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing there, Ivan, you made a great comment a minute ago, right? It's part of the reason is the addressable market for acquisitions is getting smaller by the year, especially in Europe. But the way we look at the U.S., there's still plenty of runway here, but at the same time, valuations continue to climb, right? And so your multiple arbitrage game that you're continuing to play is going to run out of room because you can only arb so much. And so then it comes down to, can you operate and can you drive incremental value inside the hospital? And our industry's in a really, very frank, and I can say this because I'm a vet, industry's in a terrible job on data. And so for years, everything you've heard is, oh, well, visits are declining inside hospitals. Well, they actually aren't, right? If you really peel back the layers and you look at it, yes, pet owners, so it was like counterintuitive. Well, pet ownership is going up, but visits are declining. Like, how does that happen? Like, people just aren't going to the vet. Well, they are going to the vet. They're bringing their pets in. And so in clinical visit, pet in the hospital visits are actually climbing. They've been growing. They've been growing for as long as we've been looking at it. What's declining is the non-clinical visit, people coming in to pick up the refill, the bag of food, things like that. And so when you have an industry that doesn't really dive into, or up until this point in time, really peel back the layer of the onion in order to be able to get people to action on it and give them things like that, you're never going to be able to leverage operational efficiencies and really talk to people about, hey, here are things you can do inside your hospital. And so, like, what's the number one thing you can do to buffer against non-clinical visits falling, right? Well, got to have an online pharmacy. I think the rudimentary, analysis on that is like, oh, we lose margin on that. Well, hell, you're losing it anyway. Somebody's taking it from you. And so if you don't do anything defensive, like, where are you going to be? And the ultimate reality is that we don't staff our hospitals relative to the amount of product we sell, right? We staff our hospitals by the number of tails that are coming through our door. And we don't have the majority of hospitals, unless you're a massive hospital, doesn't have one person that just does inventory. And so it's not like you can lean up from a staff perspective and still drive incremental margin and still drive the same amount of EBITDA inside a hospital or profit inside a hospital if you just said buy all the product. And so you have to have defensible positions on what you're going to do, and how you look at a hospital is based off that. So, hey, non-clinical visits are falling. What are you going to do?
I got a fun question for you guys next. So the acquisition of 130 some odd hospitals I'm sure it's managed to show you some funny things and some very innovative things. And so I don't know who wants to take the funny things and who wants to take the innovative things, but it'd be great to hear some of the stories without naming people that may be hurt because of the naming. So
or name them.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, on the funny stuff, to me, that's one of the greatest things about doing what we're doing. I just love being a vet. And so the number of veterinarians I get to meet and everything else, and just kind of their stories. And every vet has absolutely fantastic stories, just comical. You could do a whole, podcast series about funny vet stories and stuff they've seen inside hospitals.
That's a good idea for you and Ethan. Maybe you guys should start a podcast.
And so what's really great, frankly, is when you partner with a hospital and you see nuance on what they're doing, or you're able to glean just small little best practice things. And frankly, the biggest thing, it's one thing to tell a hospital, hey, like, this is how all the other hospitals are doing it, or this is how this particular hospital is doing it, being successful. But what really drives that home is that, when we bring our hospitals together, when we bring our hospitals managers together, lead veterinarians together, and things like that, when they're sharing best practices, that's what really resonates. It's one thing for us to say it from a top-down approach, which is not who we are as an organization, but, allowing them to, cross-pollinate ideas and things like that, and have it take hold on their weekly phone calls that they have and conference calls makes a huge difference.
Well, that wasn't very funny, Jay. So, where's the friggin' story at?
So I'll give you so this is one of my personal stories. So I was, so this goes back to, it's actually the first employee I ever terminated, not related to this, but I had a groomer, and I was an owner of my original hospital. It'd been about 6 months. And this groomer's poodle, who she brought into the clinic every day, had passed away. And so instead of getting it cremated, she got it taxidermied. And not only did she get it taxidermied, she got it taxidermied on a skateboard. And she would wheel this, she tied a rope to the front of it, and she would wheel this skateboard with this taxidermied poodle into the clinic every day and then bring it back in and put it in there. And that's the first part, a little bit of crazy and funny. But the poodle always rode in the back window of the car, right? And so every day when she'd leave, she'd take it and put this skateboarded taxidermied poodle in the back window of the car. And so she left one day at 2:00 and went to the grocery store right around the corner from the clinic. And it was summer day and it got really hot. And I'm in an exam room, and all of a sudden I hear somebody run to the clinic screaming. So I think an emergency is going on.
Oh my God.
And she's holding this skateboarded poodle, and the glue in the dog's neck had gotten so hot and melted that it looked like The Exorcist, and it kind of rotated the dog's neck around. And she wanted me to fix it. She was like freaking out in the lobby. I'm in an exam room. I got an exam room full of clients and everything else. And she's wanted me to fix this taxidermied poodle that's neck is melted and now looks like something out of a horror story. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you just can't make stuff like that up. And I mean,
you've redeemed yourself.
Shawn, you asked for it. Yeah,
you've redeemed yourself. Good work.
Yeah, I ended up having a Terminator because like 2 days later, I'm in surgery, and my surgery room at that point in time backed up to my grooming room, and I smell smoke, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the building's on fire. Well, turns out she quote unquote was so stressed out she was smoking in a clinic, and I was like, you can't do this
in the clinic.
You can't smoke, right? And then she's like, oh no, this was 2007.
Yeah, that would have been fine in the early 80s.
Right. And then she tells me, she's like, oh, well, if I can't smoke in here, then, I'm so stressed out about what happened to my taxidermy dog. If I can't smoke in here to relieve my nerves, and I just can't work here. And I was like, sounds good. See ya.
So how about on the innovation side? What's been the big thing that you guys have pulled from all of these acquisitions, and how'd you get there?
I don't think you can really just say one thing. I mean, that's the great thing about when you partner or acquire a hospital is that you get an influx of experience and talent. And so if you buy a 3 or 4 doctor hospital, I mean, what you're acquiring at that point in time is over 100 years of veterinary industry experience and knowledge. And so I think I don't want to pinpoint to one specific thing, but I think it's the veterinarians inside that hospital, and even some of the hospital managers and technicians that are inside there, they ask for stuff. I mean, I think that's one of the things that was extremely surprising to me when we got into this, is I thought most hospitals want to be left alone. But they've been thinking about things for years. They haven't had access to the data or haven't been able to pull that out of their practice management system in order to be able to action on it. And so they say, hey, we send them our reports, and then we frequently get, hey, well, if you thought about this, or what about this KPI, or what about this data point? And so we continue to evolve and really build our data models and our KPIs around things that they're asking for. And some of them are things that I didn't think of, and we hadn't thought of in our existence. And they're really, really smart, innovative folks. I mean, I think it goes back to what's going on in COVID right now. Our industry immediately pivoted from clients coming into exam rooms, and all of a sudden we're doing curbside. And that happens in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And then what we've seen from an efficiency standpoint inside our hospitals just over the last 6 weeks with doing curbside is now they're seeing just as many patients as they were before. It's just in a different manner. Like, there's very few industries out there, especially from a resilience standpoint and a knowledge set standpoint inside these hospitals, that can pivot that fast. And it's really, it's a testament to who we have in our hospitals and who veterinarians are as a core of a people. And so, I think it goes really long-winded answer to your question, but it's more than just one thing. And it's typical things that they've been thinking about for years. They just haven't had the access or, frankly, the time to really dig into it and really try to find the answer. And when they ask us, we're like, oh, man, that's really smart. We should go check that out.
Man, all your competition's sitting out there now thinking, damn, why didn't they give me the KPIs?
Yeah.
Well, I caught one that we will broadcast. So basically the tails through the door KPI. That's what I heard. We're gonna implement that one. But that's really cool. But you know what? I just want to comment on that. And I think that I can, because I am a vet. I'm actually twice vet in different countries. But I think that our profession is resilient, or one of my favorite books now is Anti-Fragility by Taleb. But I think that we're also lazy. Because if you think about implementing anything before COVID, God forbid implement something because I don't like change, I don't want to do this, I don't want to implement telemedicine, I don't want to. Immediately, when something happens like this, we go, boom, telemedicine tomorrow in every single hospital, workflows change. And with SmartFlow, I was trying to implement, we put it into 600 hospitals, and every time it's a war. You can, I'm set in my ways, but when it's needed, vets are very innovative. So I really like what you said there.
Yeah.
So, this is great. I do want to give a shout out to you and to tell all the clinics out there that are looking for partners and to sell. It sounds like you guys are great partners. It sounds like you're leveraging data and you're listening to your clinics. It sounds like you're not making the change, and you're really not making the change because some of the consolidators say that but don't do that. And so I just wanted to kind of, give a shout out, and anybody who wants to partner up with the SVP, I think that's probably a great idea. One thing that we do ask at the end of the show is there a book or TED Talk or YouTube video or something that you found inspiring, interesting, innovative that you could recommend to our listeners? Jake.
Yeah, I'm a big podcast guy. And so, obviously I travel a ton on the road a pretty good bit. Well, not lately here, but on the road a pretty good bit. And unfortunately, some of the commuter flights that I take don't have Wi-Fi. And so I'm unable to get some work done on the flight. And so, I've become a huge podcast guy over the last couple of years. The one that I always go back to that's just super interesting and is Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman. Just a fantastic podcast. And so, he talks to, just the talent, obviously, and the innovators that he has on that podcast that he talks to, just the depth that you get. Obviously there's no veterinary relation there, right? He's never had a veterinarian on there or anything from a consolidation perspective on there, but technology, food, just you name it. And so you're able to glean certain things that you wouldn't have thought about and how it's applicable to veterinary medicine. I think every industry always says, oh, well, my industry is different because of this. And so, I think veterinary medicine is different for a lot of reasons, but at the same time, the ultimate reality is that we're a customer service business. And so when you hear some of these innovators and people that he has on his podcast talk about customer service, and also for me as well, for us as an organization, just the things that they talk about from a culture perspective and, how they built and scaled companies, massive, multi-billion-dollar companies and what they focused on from a culture insight. Those are things that even a single doctor hospital can pull out and glean and how they build culture inside their hospital, even if it's only 5 or 6 people inside there. So I think just the amount of talent and the wisdom that comes out of that podcast and, just the mistakes that you hear. That's the thing is like you see these folks like the Reid Hoffmans of the world, right? You see their success, but you really don't hear anything about their failures. And that's one of the things the podcast focuses on. They talk about all the missteps they made until they finally got it right. And so, it's encouraging to think that, hey, most people just don't hit that first pitch home run. Like they've had a ton of at bats. They've learned a ton. And frankly, for me, especially hearing stuff like that allows you to see around corners a little bit and not take some of the missteps that they've taken in their careers and as they built their businesses and organizations and avoid those. It's a great podcast.
Sounds pretty good. I can't wait to listen. Last question. We like to get other innovators on the show. Do you guys have anybody that you think we should have a conversation with?
Yeah, you guys have interviewed a lot of the people that I would have said for this, a lot that go to or have started some of the really great conferences out there. But I think somebody that's more an observer of the industry, but would be an interesting conversation would be David Westenberg. He's the Senior VP of Equity Research for Animal Health at Guggenheim Securities. And he and his team have taken some really thoughtful, very investment-oriented views on the next 5 years in animal health and, what will grow, what will decline, what's going to shift, what's going to continue, et cetera. And I think they continue to comb the industry for what's the next trend, what's going to be a mainstay for years to come. And I think that would be an interesting person to talk to.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.